The lanterns hung low over the courtyard, their light pooling on white marble and polished shoes, turning the Gala into a river of warm gold. Crystal glasses chimed. Laughter threaded through a string quartet. Ariana Cole paused beneath an archway, took in the hush of flowers and perfume, and stepped forward like she belonged, because she did. She had been invited. She had come to celebrate, to be seen for who she was on that night. A hand closed on her wrist before she could cross the threshold. It was abrupt, hard, a grip that did not belong in that soft-mannered world. Officer Grant Mercer hauled her sideways across the stone, the scrape of a clutch against tile cutting through the music. Heads turned, a dozen phones rose like a swarm. Some faces tightened, a few, mid-conversation, tilted into cruel amusement. "Ma'am, you can't be here," the officer said, voice flat, almost rehearsed. He shoved her against a pillar to emphasize it. She felt the cold stone at her back, the flash of cameras, the sudden tightness at the base of her throat. People watched the way one watches an accident, horrified but held in place by curiosity. He reached for his cuff. The motion was slow enough for everyone to see. Hands hovered at pockets. A smile that was almost a smirk crossed his mouth. He began to speak, an accusation, clipped and public. Ariana's mind narrowed to a single stubborn thread. "I did nothing wrong." She did not scream. She did not plead. Her jaw set. Her eyes met his, steady, refusing to make the spectacle he wanted. She put both palms to the pillar and refused to cooperate with the display. Rage sat under her skin like a live thing. It was not the wild, frantic panic the officer seemed to expect. It was quiet. It was righteous. Phones filmed every second. A woman in a sequined dress leaned forward and hissed at the officer, then quickly pocketed her phone when she realized she'd been recorded. Someone laughed, too loud to be comfortable. A few guests murmured that security should handle it. No one moved quickly enough. The officer's hand snapped closed on metal. The click was a small, obscene punctuation in the middle of clinking glass. He was about to lock the wrist when a voice cut across the courtyard. A cold, controlled sound that made everyone still as glass. "Let her go." It was not shouted. It needed no volume. The voice belonged to someone used to being obeyed. The officer's hand froze. The cameras swung. A woman had crossed the lawn with the sure stride of someone who owns no explanation. Governor Adrian Ellison stood tall at the edge of the group, coat half open, hair pulled back, every gesture measured. She stepped between them, eyes on the officer. Her voice was steady. Then, softer but ironclad, she said the words that cleaved the moment in two. "That's my daughter." The sound of it landed like a verdict. Conversations died mid-syllable. The officer's shoulders went slack. For an instant, the courtyard existed only in the space between his shock and the governor's quiet claim. Someone muttered. A phone fell. The man's mouth opened and closed on a protest that held no purchase. His authority, which had been fastened around him like armor, felt suddenly thin and exposed. Security moved faster now. They guided the officer back from where he'd stood, hands up, face draining of color. He tried to speak. Pleas, objections, the clumsy insistence of someone caught halfway between excuse and apology. The governor's eyes did not shift from Ariana. She reached out, took Ariana's hand, and led her away from the pillar and the cameras, as if pulling a fragile thing to safety. If this scene hits you, drop one sentence in the comments. What should happen to people who misuse their power? By morning, the clip had done its own work. News vans queued outside the venue. Social platforms fed the footage into an endless loop. The headline language varied. Outrage, disbelief, pride, but the image repeated: a young woman pressed to a pillar, a uniformed officer reaching for cuffs, and a governor's hand resting protectively on a wrist. Within hours, the police department released a brief statement. Officer Grant Mercer had been placed on immediate administrative suspension, pending a full investigation. A spokesperson emphasized that the department took all allegations of misconduct seriously. The phrasing was measured, the consequence was clear in its limits. Sponsors associated with the gala issued terse statements about evaluating their relationships. Community leaders called for transparency. Civil rights attorneys volunteered their contact information in interviews. The clip crossed feeds, local, then national, and every share multiplied the pressure on institutions that had waited too long to move without being watched. At police headquarters, the scene was quieter, sterile, fluorescent. Officer Mercer sat across from a superior, hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold. He spoke quickly, words tumbling into each other. Misidentification, procedural error, I thought. He sounded almost relieved to have reasons. The chief listened. The chief's face was a ledger, part irritation, part calculation. He could see how the footage would read beyond their office, how a single act, captured in crystal clarity, could reshape careers and trust. "We have to respond," the chief said finally. "But it's not just about him. It's about the message we send moving forward." The officer's pleading turned inward then, anger at being exposed, fear of losing more than a badge. The chief marked him as a liability. The department announced an internal review and reiterated that a full investigation would follow. Meanwhile, in living rooms and comment sections, people argued over intent and accountability with the bluntness of those watching through smoke. Others told stories of moments when they had been singled out in their own lives, on buses, in stores, at work. The clip became a mirror, and the cracks it revealed were many. A week after the courtyard, Ariana and Governor Ellison found themselves on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The same lantern light turned distant in the windows below into soft rectangles. The noise of cameras and commentators had not entirely faded, but here the air was different, less hawkish, more human. Ariana stared at the streetlights. "I didn't think anyone would step in," she said. The words were small. "You didn't ask anyone to," the governor replied. Her voice held no theatrical balm, just plain recognition. "You had every right to be there. You had every right to be treated with dignity." Ariana let herself lean into the acknowledgement, the kind of validation that law can't always offer and which 1,000 trending posts could never replicate. For a long time they spoke about small things. The smell of rain against stone, the way public shame lingers like a scent, but they returned again and again to what had happened and what must follow. "I can suspend," the governor said. "I can call for an investigation. I can demand transparency. But suspension, statements, headlines, those are not the same as change." They discussed structures, training, oversight, clear avenues for complaints that don't evaporate in bureaucracy. They spoke of witness responsibility, how the people at the gala had watched, recorded, and finally watched some more. They spoke of the power of someone in a position of authority to interrupt harm. They did not indulge in easy answers. Reform was framed as work, slow and precise, requiring more than indignation. Ariana thought of the officer's face in that frozen instant, confusion giving way to the sudden, sharp clarity of someone stripped of unchallenged power. She did not wish him harm, she told herself. She wished accountability and the kind of correction that prevents a repeat. She imagined procedures that stopped scenes from occurring at all, clearer boundaries, better training, independent oversight, community input. She envisioned a system that made it harder for a single act of prejudice to turn into a public spectacle. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, the two women planned modest, practical next steps. A public call for the investigation to be thorough, support for the legal advocates offering Ariana assistance, a push for an audit of the department's policies. They agreed to let the moment be used, not as a shield against scrutiny, but as a lever for it. In the weeks that followed, the investigation proceeded. The department released periodic updates, community groups organized forums, and conversations that had been private opened into public forums. The officer remained on administrative suspension while a formal review gathered statements and evidence. Sponsors reconsidered their involvement with events tied to the department. Nothing was magically resolved. Nothing was proclaimed a victory. But the spotlight had forced movement. Small, uneven, necessary. What mattered most in the quiet was a restoration of dignity for the person who had been put on display. Ariana returned to her work, to the people who had always known her worth. She found allies she had not expected. She found doors open and also doors that remained stubbornly closed. The governor kept to her word in practical ways, supporting a transparent review, urging procedural changes, and using her voice to demand the kind of accountability that leaves less room for the prejudiced decisions of a single individual. Power, the story suggested, could be used to harm or to heal. The difference often lay in whether someone chose to speak up when a wrong was occurring. The image of a mother stepping forward to name a daughter in public had been simple and shattering. It rewrote what had threatened to become a private humiliation made public. It did not erase what had happened, but it turned an act of abuse into an act of public reckoning. If this moved you, share the story. Tell us in the comments what accountability should look like. One sentence, one idea. If you want more stories like this, consider subscribing. The work of protecting dignity is ongoing, and every conversation helps shape what comes next.